and involved in the New Skills for a New Economy project. Welcome to today's webinar, co-sponsored with the 74. Today, we're pleased to have Governor Jared Polis with us, the 43rd Governor of Colorado. Governor Polis is a longtime champion for education. He got his start in public service on the State Board of Education, and he's never quite recovered from the experience. But as governor, he's continued to make historic investments to ensure every student from early childhood to higher education can thrive. Under his leadership, Colorado made the first 2 years of college free for qualified students. He continues to invest in innovative efforts to build and strengthen connections between Colorado's education system, workforce system, and employers. Governor Polis currently serves as chair of the Bipartisan National Governors Association. His year-long chair initiative is entitled Let's Get Ready, Educating All Americans for Success. And he hopes to spark a national conversation on student success. After our conversation with the governor will be followed by a panel of Colorado officials who will talk about how Colorado has been working with Governor Polis's leadership to ensure that all Coloradans are educated so that they're ready for success. We'll do about 20 minutes or so of a conversation with the governor. You can put questions in the chat. I'll try to keep track of that, and we'll have some time at the end to look at additional questions if we haven't gotten to the ones that are on the chat. So first of all, Governor, thanks for being with us and welcome.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Bruno.
Okay, and nice to see you again. The last time we saw each other, I don't know if you remember, was actually here in Washington at a PPI dinner before you left to go back to Colorado.
So I missed those. I missed those dinners.
Thanks. So let's start with the basics. So what's the initiative all about? What are you hoping to accomplish?
So, as you said, let's get ready, educating all Americans for success. First of all, let's get ready kind of operates at two levels. I mean, let's get ready the individual learner for success, and let's get ready our economy for success, preparing people with the skills that companies need to grow and thrive. So really, our economic success, individual success, far from being mutually exclusive, the two are very consistent. For individuals to thrive, they need good jobs to move into. For the corporate sector to thrive, they need people with the skills that are needed. And then it's about how do we really measure and have metrics that establish how well we're doing in this area. I'm of course supportive of, having standardized tests, reading and math, and those are very good. But just because students are able to achieve a grade level in reading and math does not necessarily mean that they're ready for today's and tomorrow's job market, right? Of course, people need to read, but again, reading alone or mathematical skills at grade level alone, those are not the requisite skills for many of the wonderful jobs that we have today and tomorrow.
Yeah, so step back for a second, and you've described a situation that you're trying to achieve. So that assumes that there are probably some things that are going on right now that are barriers to that, or there are some problems that you see in the way things have traditionally been approached. So maybe talk a little bit about that part of the equation here.
There's just very little data that comes back to states. States are major funders of education, right? It's the biggest line item in our budget. It is for most states. So it's a very good position, and that's why this is an initiative of the National Governors Association. It's a great question for governors to ask. What are we getting for our money? In most cases, including Colorado, we don't operate the schools. They're operated by school districts, but we certainly fund them. So are we getting what we need for the individual learner to succeed and for our state economy to succeed? These math and reading scores, they're certainly not sufficient. We need to do better. But even if somehow every kid was proficient in math and reading, that doesn't correlate to are they ready for success and having good jobs. So we're really looking at other indicators, right? A high school diploma is not a great indicator. It's good to have. It helps open doors. It's important. But again, a high school diploma doesn't tell employers a lot. So what kind of skills certifications can we get? Can we get students who, for instance, have a cybersecurity certificate? I visited a program yesterday in Thornton that enables them to get a good job when they graduate. If they are going on to higher ed, how do we make sure they don't need remediation, right? That high school diploma signifies you are ready to learn at the college level. We have in Colorado many opportunities where students can graduate high school with associate's degrees in either 4 years or 5 years. and be able to get a good job right out of high school. So all of these things we do, but how do we measure them? How do we make sure that the metric is universal and that we hold all of our schools accountable for delivering good results for the individual and for our economy?
And the initiative, as I understand it, actually spans literally preschool all the way to the workforce. It's not just something focused on high schools or only on workforce or I mean, and you go back as far as preschool. So you really
That's right.
think the kind of link here. So you want to talk a little bit about
Yeah,
this?
let's get ready across the entire continuum of our schools. And I'd say it's kind of half high school to career transition, but there's a lot that goes in to get kids ready for high school. So again, when you lose a lot of kids in the 8th, 9th grade transition, if kids don't have the skills to achieve at high school, it's hard to even be talking about the different skills or trades that they can learn. And we know that the best way to close the achievement gap is to prevent it from occurring in the first place. And that's why early childhood education is so important. It's harder, more expensive, less likelihood of success to get a 7th grader or 9th grader who's behind up to grade level. We need to do it. It's easier to prevent them from falling behind grade level in the first place. And that begins with quality preschool and kindergarten and continues through elementary and middle school.
And this initiative has been underway for a while. I think officially you were elected to the chairmanship in July, around that time at the summer NGA conference. What's happened thus far? Have you had any hearings or regional meetings, or on a practical level, what have you been doing to push this initiative forward?
So the reception from our fellow governors has been great. There's huge buy-in from Republican and Democratic governors. I think, having a statewide vantage point and as funders of education, they inherently get, hey, what are we getting for it? How do we make sure we're getting what we need for our economy, for the individual? You often find, Democrats talking more about the individual, Republicans talking more about the economy, but they both care about both. Republicans care about the individual, Democrats care about the economy. So it really hits a need. We've done a number of sessions, including here in Denver. I'll be in Las Vegas next week. We are gearing up for our major gathering in Washington, D.C. So it's a series of regional gatherings with thought leaders and experts, as well as working on a report. Again, state facing. Doesn't mean we won't have some recommendations for the federal government. We probably will. Some recommendations for school district for best practices. We probably will. But the meat of it, this being collaborative projects of states, of governors, and states being in an excellent position to ensure accountability for being ready for success for the individual and for the economy, are going to be state level recommendations.
Yeah, and what has been the main, and maybe there's more than one issue, but what are you beginning to see, or what has been a significant takeaway, or a couple of big takeaways from the conversations you've had thus far?
So, we don't have a lot of ways that states actually measure if students are ready to succeed when they graduate high school. There's statewide graduation rates, but then there's very little about how that graduation correlates with success. Some states have exit exams. Again, they might tell a little bit about what a student knows, but not necessarily what skills they have for the workforce. So, we're really interested in getting to the bottom of how many students need remediation in college. The answer should be close to zero, because a diploma should mean you're ready for college. How many students are graduating with a meaningful credential that employers value, or work-based learning experience, apprenticeships, on-the-job training? These are outcomes that we want to find really good ways to have a metric for as well. We're going to present a roadmap of state-based research to really advance this conversation around outcome-based measurements for states and student success. And that'll be the work product of this initiative this summer.
I actually have had the opportunity to visit the Cherry Creek Innovation Campus, which I assume you're familiar with. And if you don't mind, maybe talk a minute or so just on that specific initiative, because it struck me as really a sort of fascinating attempt to work at this problem at the district level, as opposed to just each individual school trying to do something on its own, where students, are in their high schools, but they across the district come to this one main campus several times a week. So I think it was an interesting sort of model to look at.
Yeah, and again, what we're working on is what are the metrics for success there. Cherry Creek is very exciting. We also have St. Vrain, a number of school districts that are doing these kind of new model of what, let's talk about kind of the people's knowledge base in this call. Many of you might be familiar with kind of Voc Tech and what school districts were doing 50 years ago, which was the same as what they were doing 20 years ago. They might have a campus, they have shop there, they might have hairstyling, they have all those things. Those things are still needed, but there's also kind of a whole set of kind of new career options in addition to those legacy ones. And if you go to Cherry Creek Tech, for instance, they have aviation tech training, leading to certification in aviation tech, healthcare related fields. Many of our high schools do this, including them. You could become a nurse assistant. You can get your phlebotomy certification right out of high school to draw blood. So these are real meaningful. You can have a pathway to your EMT training. Many of them are done in partnership with community colleges. So what you'll see if you go to the Cherry Creek Innovation Campus or the St. Vrain one is kind of what that new face of career in Voc Tech looked like, where not only does it not have the same stigma it might have 30, 40 years ago, or when I was in high school or where you were, but if anything, it is a premium. People want to participate in these things. It's the best part of the day, the most meaningful part of the day. Many of the students have a home high school. They move over to the campus for part of the day. I was at one in, as I said, Thornton the other day. Cybersecurity certificates right out of high school. Kids can earn $80,000+ a year. They're able to get that through their junior and senior year while they spend 3 or 4 hours a day on this campus and the rest in their other campus. But regardless of whether it's done on the same campus, different campuses, these questions really depend on how large is the school district, how sprawling. Obviously, rural school districts only going to have one high school, but certainly in the metropolitan ones, they've been able to consolidate to kind of build the programmatic expertise that they need for meaningful certificate and credentialing programs in this kind of new wave of innovation centers.
I'm looking at the laundry list of as you say, if governors may examine outcome-based measures and optimization for topics, including but not limited to, and then you literally go down a list here: early literacy, numeracy, after-school, summer, work-based learning, dual and concurrent enrollment, skills-based learning, technology and artificial intelligence in the classroom, educator development and support, data systems, and role of state agencies. I mean, you see this as a kind of comprehensive approach to this data collection issue. What has been a big barrier to doing that? I mean, you had experience, you've been in Colorado now as governor for one term, were recently reelected. So you've got some hands-on experience about the difficulties of pulling this off, the kinds of barriers that are encountered in trying to make a data system that works at this level to be comprehensive. What are some of the lessons learned or insights you've gotten in the process of doing this?
Well, as I said, we have entire high schools in Colorado, like Colorado Early Learning Charter School, where every student graduates with an associate's degree, and it's over 3,000 students at this high school. Everyone graduates with an associate's degree. But again, what it doesn't get, well, of course, it benefits the student if they go to great jobs. If they go into college, they only need 2 years to complete, or 2.5 years to complete a 4-year degree. That's all wonderful. We don't have kind of a metric piece on top of that to actually officially say, hey, you're doing a good job with your outcomes. And just as importantly, and often harder, hey, you're not doing a good job with your outcomes. We got to change something here. So while these sort of points of excellence exist, 1,000 points of light, whatever you might want to call it, they're not yet universal. They don't touch every student. There's students falling through the cracks that would benefit from it. Our economy is also paying the price in not having access to people with the skills that are needed to power it. So there's a lot more we need to do. And I think that by bringing attention to it, transparency, and a solid layer of evaluation, we can do what we have been focused on, the traditional, reading and writing, of course, prerequisite skills. But how do we apply that same level of rigor towards evaluating what we're doing around skills and preparation for success?
I'm looking at we've got maybe 5 minutes or so before you need to run to your next event. Let me take a question off of the chat here, and I'm trying to summarize it a bit. I'm curious about how you're thinking about R&D as a potential driver for your Let's Get Ready goals.
So, R&D is mostly going to be people that are going on to the college level. And so I would look at a couple things with that. One is how do we make sure that a high school diploma signifies college readiness, right? Remediation takes time and takes money. and leads to less successful outcomes in college. Obviously, some students rather than even pursuing and drop out. So how do we make sure the students are ready? And of course, we're excited to get experiential and science learning and projects into the high school level, often in collaboration with our 2-year and 4-year institutions for students that are pursuing that. We have great examples in Colorado, robotics being one of them, where they've been incorporated into the curriculum, where students are doing cutting edge work around developing robotics for novel applications right at the high school level. We talked about Cherry Creek. A lot of this is at St. Vrain Innovation Center, another great example in our state. So I can point to these, but we're missing two things. We're missing universality, and then we're missing metrics to show success. For instance, linking directly to the R&D sector. I think that they mean federal R&D investments at the federal level, and obviously federal government does fund most of our R&D. We have University of Colorado, over $1 billion a year of federal investment. Colorado State University, $600 million a year of federal investment.
I don't want to get overtly political here, but there is a big conversation going on, certainly within the Democratic Party, but it also concerns the Republicans about an agenda that speaks to working class voters. It seems to me that there's a connection here between the kind of things you're talking about and that issue. And I wonder if you'd talk about that a little bit, about how this way of framing success, particularly when it comes to education, might be a way to bridge the gap to working class voters.
Well, I mean, look, you might have, working class family in Colorado working hard, and maybe the husband and wife are earning, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year. Their kid right out of high school getting a cybersecurity certificate kick an $84,000 a year job, right? I mean, that's the kind of upwardly mobile opportunity that excites people. I mean, too many people feel like they're falling behind their parents' generation. I can't buy a home. I can't earn and save what they're saving. The pathway to that is skills. And so how do we, it may or may not be a college degree, right? A college degree, fine, it might convey skills. If you do want to be an engineer or a lawyer, sure, you got to go to college to be able to do that. But if you want to be a system administrator, if you want to be, an aviation tech, if you want to be in so many different fields, it doesn't necessarily mean college, but it certainly means more than just a high school diploma and proficiency in English and math. So that's that wide area we're talking about that fundamentally means opportunity for people.
There is a question here specifically on this skills issue, skills-based approach to learning. And the question is along the lines of wondering if you can elaborate a bit on conversations you're having with other governors like this. And this person mentions a specific one. I don't know that I'll mention this specific governor, but this skills-based approach to hiring and learning, is this something that you're finding that governors generally are quite tuned in on or attentive to, or what's your sort of evaluation of it?
To varying degrees. So they all intellectually, to a person, and I haven't talked with all 50, but let's say I've talked to 40 about it. I mean, to a person, they get the concept, right? They understand that their state's economy, this is important. They understand for individual opportunity, this is important. They have varying degrees of sophistication about exactly what's, the schools. Again, governors don't run schools, and some have a passing knowledge, some have more expertise. There's certainly some governors that are very excited pursuing education initiatives of their own. Part of what we hope to do is help more governors be education governors. So one of the sessions we had in Denver, we had a new governors training for National Governors Association. We had maybe 8 or 9 new governors, Democrats, Republicans coming. We had a panel on how do you be an education governor, right? Don't just ignore that 40% of your budget that goes out the door because it's run by school districts. How do you really double down on results for your state and results for individuals on that? And this is what's so exciting about being able to pull in really everybody on this, is it's not about, you have conservative Republican governors doing universal vouchers. You have, liberal Democratic governors who don't support that. But everybody wants to see results for students and results for your economy. What are we getting, regardless of how you spend it, whether you're giving it all to a district, whether you're giving it to private schools, whatever you're doing, how are you getting results? Nobody wants that money to be flushed down the toilet, negating individual opportunity and hurting your economy. Somebody else asked about second language proficiency. Look, this is one where the science shows we should be doing it at a younger age rather than we have a ridiculous way of doing it in this country that doesn't work. How many people do you know who took a foreign language for 2 years in high school and don't seem to speak a word of it and certainly aren't fluent in it? And yet Our kids aren't any dumber than kids in Europe or kids in other countries where every kid speaks two languages and wants to begin a third by high school. So the answer is, of course, you do that at the elementary level. Of course, students can be proficient or fluent in two languages by the time they're in sixth grade or eighth grade. And there's no rocket science to it because many countries in the world do this. And of course, that improves employability in a global economy. It improves American competitiveness. We have schools in our state that do it. Again, it's not universal, but I have many Spanish English dual immersion schools, or we have a Chinese English dual immersion school. We have a French English dual immersion school. They're not going to be everywhere, but there's demand. It's important that we do that. And kids are fluent in that language by sixth grade or eighth grade. If they want to start a third language optional, they can do that in high school. But again, what a waste of time in producing a good outcome to have kids take 2 years of foreign language in high school and not be able to operate or speak a word of it when they're done. That time could have been used to get a meaningful credential in a skill that will benefit them through their lives.
Okay, we've got about 90 seconds, minute and a half or so, and I don't want to keep you any longer than we've committed to. But let me ask you one final question here. Rumor has it, maybe it's an urban legend, so you can deny that this is true, but rumor has it that you're a Taylor Swift fan.
I am. That's true.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, I'm not going to ask you to sing a song, but if you had to think of a song or a lyric from her repertoire that gets to the heart of what you're trying to do here, what comes to mind? How would you parse that question?
Yeah. Let me think about that for a moment. I love to be informed by pop culture and by music and different things that we're doing. I actually got to see a Taylor Swift concert. I saw her Eras tour, which is now wrapping up. I got to see one, which is really exciting. Let me think about that for just a moment here. I would say
this was unrehearsed.
No, which is great. Gosh, I love it when she talks about kind of when she has social meaning to her music. I like her song, the man, and if she was how life would have been easier or simpler, and she faces discrimination as a woman and how she's overcome that as a strong, independent woman. Certainly a positive message in her moves. I mean, look, a lot of her music is about 70% of her lyrics are about breaking up and relationships, which is another thing that people often have to learn the hard way. But I think that sort of challenging ourselves to kind of interpret at many different levels popular artists like Taylor Swift is part of being a meaningful member of our culture, right? And so being able to participate in culture and succeed in culture is part of what we do in our schools. And I think one more thing that certainly speaks to an issue. Schools are not just about the skills and certificates you need to succeed. Of course, I'm not denying, nor is anybody, that there's value in what you might call liberal arts in college, what you might call basic civics and economics in high school. These things are important for citizens to be able to succeed, for our country to be able to succeed. These are important for the whole individual to succeed, but they are not mutually exclusive with having the skills to put food on the table and support yourself and your family in an upwardly mobile fashion. I mean, having all the philosophy and cultural interpretation and no ability to support yourself is not a good outcome. And neither is the emptiness of only having the skills and not having the meaningful, full education to be able to critically look at media or lyrics or anything else. So that's just a parting thought on that topic.
Right. Thanks very much for your time, Governor. We know you're running around Colorado doing the things you're supposed to be doing, but we appreciate the time you've taken to be with us today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. Now we'll switch over to our panel. I'll give folks a few seconds to come on. Okay, there we are. So I'm going to turn the rest of the program over to Allison Griffin, who is a Colorado-based Forbes contributor who covers post-secondary education and the future of the work. She'll give you a little bit more information on herself and the rest of the panel, and I'll be back at the end just to sort of wrap things up. So go ahead, Allison.
Great. Thank you so much, Bruno, and thank you to Governor Polis for joining us for this conversation. His leadership in Colorado and the nation have set a new standard for career-connected learning, which is what I'm going to be talking about with our panelists today. And I am thrilled to be joined by two colleagues in Colorado, Scott LeBand, who is president of Colorado Succeeds, and Mike Macklin, who's the Associate Vice Chancellor of Workforce Solutions with the Colorado Community College System. So welcome to you both, Scott and Mike. Thrilled to have you with us. I'm going to start off and pick up a bit where the governor left off, not with a Taylor Swift song. So I'm not going to put pressure on you to come up with a lyric or a song title, but I am going to talk a little bit about blurring the lines between secondary, post-secondary education, and the workforce. And there have been a lot of efforts in the state of Colorado to do just that. So given that we have a national audience tuning in today, can you each talk a little bit about what that policy shift, that blurring of the lines between these historically siloed sectors really looks like in Colorado? Scott, I'm going to start with you, and then I'll turn to Mike.
Well, thanks, Allison, and thanks to all of you. A pleasure to be with you today. I think what we talk a lot about in Colorado and what the governor talks a lot about is really making sure that all students in Colorado have access to what we call the Big Three. And so the Big Three would be essentially 12 hours of community college credit, a work-based learning experience, and an industry credential or certification, all on an aligned pathway. So access to all three and complete at least one. And what that really starts to look like is, some of the examples that the governor gave. You're seeing students in career-connected learning experiences like apprenticeships, where they're gaining industry credentials and certifications. They're having that opportunity to apply the things that they're learning in the classroom in a hands-on way. One of the things that I love about it is they're having the opportunity to work with other adults and build their own social networks. We know through research that LinkedIn has done that is a key driver of finding careers and work in the future, is having that kind of social network. And then we also know that they're gaining credit for those experiences. So they're getting CTE credit in the high school, and they're receiving post-secondary credit when they sign up to go to an institution in the state of Colorado. If you're a high school in Colorado, you're also benefiting from this. You're going to be seeing funding for full-time students, even though students are spending less than half of their time in your building any week, because we really believe in competency-based learning, not just seat time. The other thing that we're seeing is schools benefiting from outcomes-based funding. So every time a student receives an industry credential or certification, that high school is going to receive an outcomes-based financial bonus. And then we're also seeing some of the other things that the governor talked about around improved attendance and student engagement, participation in school, which all correlates with improved academic achievement, completion, graduation, matriculation. And then lastly, I would just say on the post-secondary side, you're seeing an expansion of partnerships, not just around concurrent enrollment and dual enrollment, but also with employers and K-12 institutions themselves, trying to find and co-create new pathways and new learning experiences that really deliver on the skills that the governor spoke about earlier.
There certainly is a lot going on in Colorado, as you have just alluded to and described, Scott. I'm curious, Mike, taking what Scott has just laid out, how are some of those efforts being operationalized, particularly with partners like the community college system, and also, as Scott just mentioned, partnerships across industry? What are you seeing? What's the system leading on?
Yeah, great question, Allison. And I'll pick up on some of what Scott said to kind of move us into this. But one of the things that we are seeing is a much more intentional collaboration with industry leaders like Scott and these industry organizations coming together. I do want to contextualize the response just a little, and that Colorado is unique in the way that we manage career and technical education. So we're the only state in the nation that we actually at the community college system manage middle school, secondary, and post-secondary CTE programs. That allows for some really great alignment of those programs as individuals move through. One of the things that I would highlight just from an operational standpoint is working with Scott's organization and the general contractors here in Colorado. We've met with industry partners for about a year now to really refine what the construction pathway looks like in Colorado. So high school students getting industry recognized credentials, moving into apprenticeships, getting credit towards their associate's degree, and then ultimately their bachelor's degree. So really that collaborative effort and kind of reframing that whole pathway.
Oh, that's great. And thank you for that tangible example, because I was curious if you could both speak to, and maybe Mike, you can pick up on this first, but can you give an example of some of those career connected initiatives that address the skills gap between what employers need and what students are learning in perhaps even a more traditional academic setting? Where is the community college system stepping in? How are you helping to forge some of those new partnerships? And maybe give us an example of one of those.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think one of our primary focuses as of late is how can we operate as kind of a power of 13? We're 13 individual institutions across the state of Colorado, 40 different locations. And then when you look at school districts, you're talking over 150 school districts across the state. So inherently, there's going to be variations in programs and that sort of thing. So to one of the questions that was asked of the governor, we really have to come together and identify skills in a standard language, both for employers and for students. And so the example I would give actually is one of our behavioral health initiatives, which is a partnership with Education Design Lab, where we met with all of the behavioral health partners in Colorado and actually defined a new occupation that would allow individuals to move into the field, and they can earn that credential both in high school or on their own as an adult or just out of high school. But this qualified behavioral health assistant now is an occupation that an individual can move directly into the workforce. And then there's a path to a bachelor's degree if they choose to do so. So I really think, and Scott mentioned it in his first response, but really that focus on co-creation is a big shift for education. That's not traditionally and inherently how education is operated.
And so to that point, Scott, actually, I'm going to turn to you because the work of Colorado Succeeds is historically rooted in relationships between business, industry, and K-12 education. And I know your portfolio has expanded to touch post-secondary education. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about the role of industry partners to develop and sustain some of those meaningful work-based learning experiences, particularly at the secondary, middle school, and high school level.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think when it comes to this, what we're starting to see is that in the wake of COVID, and we're faced with chronic absenteeism, lack of engagement and participation in schools, career connected learning can really be an opportunity to turn that on its head, and can provide an opportunity to help give students that jolt or that excitement or enthusiasm for why they want to come to school. And the business community oftentimes has a number of those experiences that they can co-design with educators, or they could just bring and do turnkey right in the classroom. What we really believe in is a full spectrum that starts as early as elementary school with identifying students' own strengths, interests, and values, then starting to go into career exposure and just understanding what are the different careers that are out there that could be available to them. We really believe that you can't be what you can't see. And so you need to have business in the schools, or having teachers in the business. And we really believe in externships, where teachers have the opportunity to work at a company over the summer, gain real world experience that they can bring back to the school. So about that awareness, exposure, we then believe in career mentorship and advising that can really be successful in the middle school experience, and starting to help young people start to refine and maybe hone in on a few things that they might want to try, realizing that they're going to change their mind a number of times, and that's fine. We just want to make sure that whatever they do, there's no dead ends. They can take the skills that they've built along that pathway and transfer them right into whatever they want to do next. And in fact, we find a lot of times that if they try something and decide they don't like it, there's actually a ton of benefit in that as well, because they're not then spending money on this in the post-secondary space where they might be accumulating debt and not have a whole lot to show for it. So you then get into high school, and we're talking about internships and career-connected learning, work-based learning, apprenticeships. We're seeing numbers of students right now working to build tiny homes when it comes to their classrooms, and in many ways they're giving those tiny homes directly over to their teachers, because there are some districts that are really struggling to find affordable housing, and the students are actually building tiny homes that then are given to their teachers as affordable housing. And what greater moment of pride for a student than to be able to say that I had a role in constructing this home that my teacher now lives in. And so business is a big unlock, and I would say they are not designed to do this. And so access is a problem if we aren't thoughtful about how we support business and getting in the game. And so there's a lot of need to make sure that there's training, tools, resources, technical assistance for business, so they know how to participate. In some cases, financial grants to start up these programs. And in Colorado, they've also been offering financial incentives and tax credits to companies that are going to offer apprenticeships.
I'm so glad that you previewed that example of the connection between what students may be able to do in a truly hands-on learning environment that then helps to shape the community. And what you also just mentioned is it extends far beyond policy change. I know, the earlier part of this conversation with the governor talked a little bit, Bruno talked a little bit with Governor Polis about, some of the policy reform and policy ideas that may need to happen, but it extends into partnerships and other philanthropic and capital investments that are not always connected to the policy environment. I'm wondering, can you maybe, Mike, you can talk a little bit about ways in which the community college system is connected in with communities through whether it's incentives or grants to help spur some of these new connections, and how do you begin to build new community among different partners in communities where your campuses are located?
Yeah, so we do that in a handful of ways. One that I would highlight that's actually been a program that's been running for quite some time is called the Skill Advance Colorado program. This is a direct grant to businesses in partnership with community colleges to build customized training that they may need. I think that the other way that we work to build community and kind of that connection between K-12 and post-secondary and the career exploration that Scott had mentioned goes back to that structural piece. Again, if our program directors within the community college system are setting the standards and the alignment with industry so that students are exploring these careers as early as middle school, huge wins for those individuals. And I think that structurally, when you look at the schools that Governor Polis referenced, those are oftentimes connected with a community college as well. And so those students are getting high school credit, they're getting college credit, an industry recognized credential, and kind of moving through. I did want to highlight one point that Scott made that we're seeing as well. We also have to educate both students and parents on what these occupations may be. Because I think traditionally, and what we've heard for a very long time, is this narrative for college for all. There are well-paying jobs that you may not need an associate's degree for. You may need an industry recognized credential, but it's also helping parents and students understand that these aren't dirty jobs, that you can work in an aerospace manufacturing plant that is one of the cleanest facilities you'll ever see, making an extremely good wage. But how do you start having those conversations in middle school?
Absolutely. That actually reminds me, as a parent myself, a conversation that I've had in my children's school, that parents can sometimes be your greatest advocate and sometimes your greatest adversary when we are thinking about shifting that narrative. So it is really important that we reach both students, learners, and their parents. Scott, do you have efforts that Colorado Succeeds has taken on to help educate parents, families, communities about sort of the new era of career connected learning? Can you talk a little bit about some of those initiatives?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we work on is something we call the Homegrown Talent Initiative, and we do this in partnership with several other nonprofit entities in Colorado, including our partners at the Colorado Education Initiative. And really what it's all about is how do we build our own talent pipeline in the state, whereas for a long time, we've benefited by importing people into our state. They bring their higher degrees with them and makes them very relevant for our high skill, high wage jobs. but we don't really feel like we're doing that right for our own students who grow up in Colorado. And so we want to make sure that all of Colorado's kids are ready for Colorado's jobs. And this Homegrown Talent Initiative is a way to do that. So right now it's a network of about 80 communities, most of whom are rural, where they have fewer than 1,000 students. And what it all starts with is actually, in many cases, it's a pizza party or something like that, where you get with the local chamber of commerce, you get with the county commissioners, you find the local employers from Main Street, you pull people from the gig economy out of their homes and into the community center, and then you bring in K-12 education in the community college, any other higher ed partners locally, and you just start with a conversation around, what does it mean to be a successful graduate of high school in our community? It's the profile of a graduate. What are the skills and competencies that you need to be successful in our local region? And we call it the educonomy because it's the connection or the nexus between where the education system meets the economy. It's sort of where Governor Polis led off with today. We think the two are very interconnected, and that when we do it on a county by county basis or a community by community basis, you really have that ground up innovation where people are sitting down with their neighbors and they're co-designing and co-constructing what these partnerships can look like. And they're going to vary in each community, whether it be the need could be around cybersecurity, as was discussed earlier, nursing, construction. One of the things we hear in a lot of these rural communities is affordable housing is an issue and a desire among young people to be an entrepreneur. And construction is a real opportunity for a young person to go through the ranks and ultimately found and own and start their own company. Something that then allows them to live a lifestyle that they want to live in the community where they grew up and not feel like they have to move to the big city in order to find opportunities in life. And so I would just say that's a huge focus on our work is not just educating, but co-designing and co-creating so that the centers, the learners at the center and everyone else is around that, trying to make sure that we are building a successful model for the community at large.
That's great. Thank you for giving voice to that. And I've seen that model work both in urban centers, certainly along the Front Range, and some of the more notable cities of Denver and Boulder and Colorado Springs, but have also seen your work in rural communities, in counties and neighborhoods that perhaps are not as well known, but the impact is pretty significant and has been game-changing for a lot of learners and families. So thank you for that. I don't want to leave off our most important cadre of principals and supporters, and that is our educator community. And so I'm curious, I know, Scott, you alluded earlier to externships, teacher externships, and giving teachers exposure to these careers, sort of frontline opportunities. I believe Colorado is actually the only state whose teacher externship program is run through the Department of Labor and Employment, not through the Department of Education. So I think that brings a unique twist to that initiative. But I know that we want to ensure that our K-12 educators are developing or delivering high quality career-connected learning experiences. What practices have you all seen? Mike, perhaps we'll start with you at the community college level. What practices have you seen to bring educators and teachers along in both the professional development side for themselves, but also for that exposure that they bring back to the classroom?
Yeah, and I think it's a great point, Allison, because many of these industries that we're teaching for, some of these occupations don't even exist yet. And so to have a teacher fully qualified to teach in this emerging field is quite difficult. So a few things that we've been doing, I mentioned the behavioral health work earlier on. We just released a scholarship program for K-12 educators so that they could actually get that micro-credential. They don't have to go back to school for a long time, but they can get that micro-credential to then teach their K-12 students that are going through. I do think that the externship model has been quite successful in the state. I think there's ripe opportunity to scale that. And then I think there's other ways that we can work the other direction. So could we have individuals from industry come into the classroom and teach and show and make sure that those students are seeing themselves and those individuals and those companies coming in and teaching. So kind of an executive on loan type of model to kind of help with that as well.
Love that, executive on loan. I think that recalibrates the way that we elevate and support our educator community, and then also just gives some some new experience to those educators. Thank you for that. Scott, anything that Colorado Succeeds is involved with on the K-12 educator side that you wanted to bring in?
You know, Mike talked about executive on loan. I think another way that we think about it is co-teaching. We've done some work to try and improve the conditions or the availability of leaders from industry to co-teach in the classroom. So you have someone who is a licensed educator who knows the best about, you know, pedagogy or classroom management, but you're bridging that to someone with the real world expertise and day-to-day knowledge from being in the field and years of experience doing that. So it's not just a one and done kind of career day, but it's actually an entire lesson plan that's been designed by those two in collaboration with one another. And we're starting to see more of that happening. I would love to see that expand even further. And I feel like particularly in CTE classes, we need to do more and get better at getting people with industry experience into the classroom.
No, that's great. And that actually leads me to my last question for both of you. We started off with the governor talking about his NGA initiative and policy reform and change and opportunities for governors to lead. We've celebrated some of the opportunities and sort of optimization of good policy here in Colorado, but I know that there's always room for improvement. So I'd be curious if both of you would give some thought to any policy or practice changes that are still needed in Colorado to continue to advance and improve this agenda. I know we're coming up on the start of the next legislative session, so curious what might be on the horizon over the coming months that would further boost what Colorado's already doing.
I'm happy to jump in here.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Basically, a handful of things come to mind. Number one, we've got a number of exciting programs that offer career-connected learning or opportunities for concurrent enrollment or dual enrollment in high school, but they're oftentimes thought of as programs. And I would like to change that mindset and have them just thought about the way that high school is done and delivered and operationalized. And so doing whatever we can to get out of the mindset that these are distinct programs with unique application processes, reporting requirements, and waivers, and instead thinking about this is just the post-secondary workforce readiness component of high school, and therefore we need to fund it as such and consolidate and integrate streamline access to those kinds of experiences so that they're not competing with one another. I think another thing is accountability. You know, we signal a lot of interest based on what we hold schools accountable for, and I think we can do a better job defining the post-secondary workforce readiness metrics that we use at the high school level. So it's not only about matriculation into college, but we're also thinking about just the next step broadly, whether that be into an apprenticeship or into the workforce or completion of a work-based learning experience or industry certificate or credential. I think two others that come to mind is measurement and data, something that Governor Polis talked about quite a bit, which is really, you know, not all these programs are created equal. So let's start running more reports through our longitudinal data system to find out which ones are working, and then make sure that we use that in our decision making about how we open up access to the ones that are doing really well and how we improve the ones that might be struggling. And then lastly, navigation and advising, I think, continues to be a major need in our state as we look at, you know, just significant counselor to student ratios, as well as a lack of tools to really help young people understand the myriad of choices that are out there and how they can compare them apples to apples.
Great. You touched on three of the four things that I had made note of, and the one that you mentioned around accountability actually resonates most deeply with me. There's a statewide task force that just concluded its work, presented its work to the State Board of Education with regard to an accountability framework that actually further elevates the post-secondary and workforce readiness metric and does a lot of what you just articulated. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. How those recommendations are received both by the board, but also by the legislature in this upcoming session. So thank you for illuminating a number of those recommendations. Mike, any other just on the periphery policy or practice changes that would just put us over the top, if you will?
Yeah, I'd like to build a little on Scott's second to last response. One of our big focuses moving forward is going to be economic mobility and our ability to track that. And so, as many know on this call, institutions have been traditionally evaluated on completion. You either have a completion or you don't. But what happens after that completion is somewhat of a black hole that we don't necessarily have a lot of insight into. So one of our large focuses right now is actually going through the data, working with our partners at the Department of Labor and these other groups to really see, did the program that you trained in with us, that credential that you earned, did that get you into the field that you studied? And then did you have some sort of economic mobility and upward movement as you moved along in your career and your educational journey? So I think that that's a really big one for us. The other one that we're really focusing on is we really want to have education for all. So that's a big focus of ours. We're access institutions. We don't turn people away when they walk in our doors. But where that kind of hits the road is, what does that mean for our rural institutions? So, we've highlighted St. Vrain, we've highlighted Cherry Creek, but the other 2/3 of the state that are on the outside in the east and the west, how do we make sure that there's career connected learning for those individuals as well? And so one of the things that I think has potential to scale and would need some additional funding over time would be virtual work-based learning experiences. We're piloting this with a few groups right now, but some company submits a computer science project, that student can pull that down out of the database and actually complete that project on behalf of that company and get paid for it. So how do we start making sure that individuals are not being punished or not having the same access based on their geographic location in Colorado?
That's great. Thank you for illuminating that opportunity, particularly for our rural students and your leadership with campuses, like you said, on the east and the west, not just down that I-25 corridor. So really grateful for that example. Scott, Mike, thank you both so much for your time and your insights on what is actually happening on the ground in Colorado. We're grateful to have your leadership and your participation today. Bruno, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thanks, Allison. And of course, thank you for moderating the panel, and to Michael and Scott for being on the panel. Thanks also again to Governor Polis, and a special thank you to his staff who helped me do some of the logistical stuff leading up to this. As is usually the case, there'll be a recording of this, a video recording of this available through PPI and the 74. And thanks to everyone on behalf of Progressive Policy Institute and the 74. Thanks for being with us.